They say land is eternal, it remembers who owns it, even when people forget. For 15 years, I worked and sacrificed, holding onto a quiet piece of countryside that meant everything to me. I thought it was safe. But one morning, I drove down that dusty old road, and what I saw nearly broke me. On my private land stood a giant, newly built house. And inside that house lived a woman who had no idea who I was. Worse, pretended not to care. That was the day my life turned upside down. I had bought the land years ago after my wife passed away. It was my sanctuary, a place where I planned to build a little cottage and live out the rest of my days in peace. For years, I paid the taxes, cleared the brush, and walked those woods whenever I needed comfort. But work had kept me away. For a couple of years, I couldn't visit. Life happens, you know how it is. When I finally returned, I couldn't believe my eyes. A massive, modern house stood right in the middle of my land. Wide balconies, fresh paint, a brand new mailbox. Someone had moved in. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I stepped out slowly, almost dizzy from shock. "Hello?" I called out, voice shaking. From the porch, a woman in her late 40s appeared, wearing sunglasses and sipping from a tall glass. She looked at me as though I were trespassing. "Yes." "Can I help you?" she asked sharply. I swallowed hard. This is my land." "Who are you?" She laughed. "Your land." "Oh, you must be mistaken. I bought this plot 2 years ago. My name's Karen. This is my house." Her confidence rattled me. I pulled out the old folder I always carried in my truck, the deed, the tax receipts. My fingers shook as I held them out. "This land is mine. I've owned it since 2005. You must have built here by mistake." She didn't even glance at the papers. Instead, she waved me off with a smirk. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, old man, but I paid good money for this property. My builder got the permits. My lawyer confirmed everything. So why don't you just leave?" Her words cut deep. My chest tightened. For a moment, I felt like the outsider. I whispered almost to myself, 15 years. "I've been holding on to this land for 15 years. Karen folded her arms, unimpressed. "Well, I've been living here for 2. So unless you've got a bulldozer and an army of lawyers, I suggest you get used to looking at my beautiful house." I couldn't believe it. Not only had she stolen my land, she was mocking me for it. That night, I barely slept. I sat at my kitchen table, spreading out every paper I owned, my deed, the county tax bills, the survey map. They were all in my name, but something didn't add up. How had Karen gotten permits? How had she convinced builders to put a house there? The next morning, I went to the county office. The clerk, an older man named James, who'd known me for years, looked just as shocked. "Tom, you still own that land. There's no record of a transfer. Whoever built that house, they built it illegally." I rubbed my forehead. "But the county signed off on permits. She says she has papers." James frowned. "Then those papers are fake, where someone slipped up badly. Either way, you've got the law on your side." Hearing that should have comforted me. But instead, I felt heavy. Taking this to court meant months, maybe years of fighting. I was tired, and all I wanted was peace. Still, I couldn't let Karen steal my sanctuary. That evening, I returned to the property. Karen was out front, trimming flowers along her fancy white fence. "Karen," I said firmly, holding up the official county records. "This is the legal proof. I never sold the land. I'm the rightful owner." She barely glanced at the documents. "Paper doesn't mean anything when I've built a life here. Look around, you do. You see me packing boxes? Do you see me leaving? No, I've invested too much to walk away because of some so-called deed." Her arrogance burned in my chest. My voice rose. "You built your life on a lie. You stole my land and pretended it was yours. You think money and walls make it right? They don't." For a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, uncertainty, maybe even guilt, but it vanished quickly, replaced with a cold glare. "If you think you're going to take this house from me, you're in for the fight of your life." Driving home, My hands clenched the wheel so hard they ached. I felt anger, sadness, and betrayal all tangled together. I thought of my late wife. How we dreamed of sitting on that land together, watching sunsets. I thought of the years I'd worked overtime just to keep paying those taxes, never letting the land go, and now. A stranger lived there, as if my sacrifices meant nothing. I pulled over on the side of the road and let the tears fall. This land is part of me, I whispered into the darkness, and I won't let anyone take it away. The battle had just begun. I didn't know yet how far Karen would go or how much it would cost me to fight for what was mine. But one thing was clear. She had no idea who she was dealing with, because I wasn't just some old man wandering onto her lawn. I was the rightful owner, and I was ready to prove it. Asterisk. Last time, I discovered the unthinkable. My land, the place I had cherished and paid for over 15 years, was stolen. A giant house stood there, and inside was a woman named Karen who claimed it was hers. I had the deeds, the proof, the history, but Karen had something else. Arrogance, confidence, and a house that made her feel untouchable. What she didn't know was that truth has a way of fighting back. And I was about to begin the hardest fight of my life. The following week, I met with an attorney, a sharp young man named Daniel, who reminded me of my son. He listened carefully as I explained everything. Flipping through my folder of documents, "Mr. Thompson," he said finally, "you have an airtight case. The deed is valid, the tax records show continuous payment, and there's no record of a sale or transfer. Legally, you're still the owner." I sighed in relief. "So it's simple then? I can just have her removed?" Daniel shook his head. "Not simple, because she's already established residency. Courts don't take kindly to kicking someone out of their home, even if it's built illegally. This will be a process. She'll fight back, maybe with forged documents, maybe with sympathy claims. You have to be ready for a long battle." I felt my stomach knot. "I'm not a man who enjoys fighting." He leaned forward. "Then let me fight for you. But you have to stand firm. Don't let her intimidate you." When Karen received the first legal notice, she didn't stay quiet. She stormed onto my driveway one evening, furious, her car screeching to a halt. She got out, waving papers in my face. "You think you can scare me with lawyers?" she screamed. "I have a contract signed by a seller. A real estate transaction. You're a fraud." I looked at the papers. The signatures were shaky, the notary stamp blurred. It was clearly a forgery. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that's fake. And you know it." Her face twisted with rage. "Fake. Don't you dare accuse me. You're just jealous because I made this place beautiful while you let it rot." Tears of anger welled in my eyes. "I let nothing rot. That land was my dream. You stole it." For a moment, she faltered. Then she spat at the ground. "You'll never win. This is my home now." She stormed off, but her words lingered like poison. Word spread quickly through the small town. Some neighbors came to me, shaking their heads. "Tom, we've seen her boasting at the market," an old friend told me. "She says the land was abandoned, and you're just some bitter old man trying to take her dream away." Others whispered that Karen was generous, that she'd hosted neighborhood gatherings, making herself seem like a pillar of the community. It hurt. People doubted me. Some avoided me altogether. One evening, I sat alone on my porch, staring into the dark. "Maybe it's not worth it," I muttered. "Maybe I should just let it go." But then I saw the picture frame on my table, my wife holding my hand, smiling in front of that very land years ago. Her voice echoed in my heart. "Never give up on our dream." I clenched my fist. "No, I will fight. For her. For us." The first hearing was brutal. Karen arrived in a tailored dress, smiling sweetly at the judge. She presented her forged documents, spoke of her investment, even shed a few crocodile tears about being harassed by an old man. I sat there, trembling with rage. When it was my turn, Daniel laid out the truth. He presented the deed, the tax records, the county clerk's testimony. Piece by piece, he tore down her lies. The judge frowned at her papers. "These documents appear questionable. Will require further investigation." Karen's mask cracked. She glared at me, her jaw tight. As we left the courthouse, she whispered coldly in my ear, "You may have won a round, but I'll ruin you before you win the war." She meant it. Weeks later, I found tire tracks torn through my yard, my mailbox smashed. Anonymous calls woke me at night. Once, I even caught someone dumping trash on my property line. Daniel warned me, "She's trying to break you. Don't retaliate. Just document everything." But the hardest blow came when Karen confronted me in front of townsfolk at the diner. "You're heartless." She shouted across the room. "You're trying to throw a woman out of her home? Everyone knows you're a bitter old widower with nothing better to do." Gasps filled the diner. My hands shook with shame. For a moment, I almost walked out. But then I stood tall and said, voice steady, "I'm not trying to take her home. I'm trying to reclaim my wife's dream, a dream I've carried for 15 years. That land is not just dirt, it's memory, sacrifice, and love. And no bully will take that from me." The diner fell silent. Karen stormed out, but a few neighbors nodded quietly in my direction. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning. Months dragged on. Karen fought every motion, delaying, lying, twisting the story. I was exhausted, drained emotionally and financially. One night, I sat in my truck by the edge of the land, watching the lights of her house glow through the trees. I whispered into the dark, "Lord, I don't know if I have the strength anymore. I'm just one man. She's tearing me apart." And then, something happened. A small boy, no older than 12, walked up the driveway. He was carrying a backpack. He stopped when he saw me. "Are you Mr. Thompson?" I nodded. "Yes, son." "Who are you?" "My name's Luke. I live with Miss Karen, but I know this isn't her land. I heard her on the phone bragging about how she tricked everyone. I thought you should know." Tears filled my eyes. This child, innocent, caught in the middle, was brave enough to tell the truth. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Luke. You've done the right thing. Don't worry. Won't let this hurt you." With Luke's testimony and the county's investigation into the forged documents, the case suddenly shifted. Evidence showed the so-called seller who signed Karen's papers didn't even exist. The notary stamp had been copied from another document. It was an elaborate fraud. In the next hearing, Daniel presented everything. The judge's face hardened as Karen squirmed in her seat. "Mrs. Karen," the judge said sternly, "it appears you knowingly presented falsified documents. This court takes such actions very seriously." Karen's charm evaporated. She stammered, I didn't know. I was misled." But it was too late. The truth was out. As the gavel struck, my heart pounded. The court recognized me as the rightful owner, but the judge gave Karen 30 days to vacate the house before further orders could be enforced. 30 days. And in those 30 days, anything could happen. Would she finally surrender? Or would she do something desperate to hold on to the home she built on lies? I didn't know, but I braced myself. Because the storm wasn't over yet. Asterisk. The court had spoken. I was the rightful owner of the land. Karen, the woman who had stolen my dream and mocked my pain, was ordered to leave within 30 days. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. She had built too much pride into those walls. And when pride is all a person has left, they can become dangerous. I thought the battle was nearly over. I didn't know the hardest test was still to come. Every day felt heavy. I'd drive by the land, watching from a distance. Sometimes I saw Karen pacing the porch, barking into her phone. Other times her blinds were drawn. The house dark like a fortress. Neighbors told me she was furious. "She says you ruined her life," one whispered. "She's talking about never leaving no matter what the judge says." I sighed. "It's not about ruining her life. It's about her stealing mine." Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Something about her silence felt more dangerous than her shouting ever had. On the 20th day, just as the sun dipped low, Karen appeared at my door. Her eyes were red. Mascara streaked across her cheeks. She clutched a folder in her hands. Please, she said softly, nothing like the woman I'd known. Don't make me leave. I have nowhere else to go.
Wait.
I stared at her, stunned. Karen, you built a mansion. You clearly have money. Her lip trembled. I spent everything. Every last cent went into that house. My husband left me years ago. My children barely speak to me. That house was supposed to be my new start. Something in her voice wavered between truth and manipulation. My heart ached, but my mind stayed clear. You stole my start, I whispered. That land was my wife's dream. You built your future on my pain. Tears spilled down her face. For a brief moment, I saw not arrogance but desperation. Give me more time, she begged. Please, just a few more months. I shook my head gently. Karen, I can't. You chose this path. Now you have to face it. She left, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Day 29, the night before the deadline. I drove out to the land, heart pounding. The house glowed with every light on, music blaring inside. It wasn't a farewell party, it was defiance. I parked by the road and walked closer. Suddenly Karen burst out the front door, drunk, holding a bottle of wine. You think you've won, don't you? She screamed across the yard. You think your little deed and your little judge can take this from me? Her voice cracked into sobs. This house is all I have left. Without it, I'm nothing. My chest tightened. I wanted to shout back, but instead, I whispered more to myself than her. We're nothing when we take what isn't ours. She hurled the bottle against the porch, glass shattering. Then she stumbled inside, slamming the door. I stood there in the quiet night, staring at the house. A place built on lies could never feel like home. Morning came. A sheriff's car pulled up alongside me as I waited by the edge of the property. Sheriff Harris, a tall, calm man I'd known for years, stepped out. Today's the day, he said. I nodded, my stomach in knots. Do you think she'll fight? He sighed. People like Karen. They usually do. Together, we walked up the driveway. Harris knocked firmly. Mrs. Karen, by court order, you must vacate this property immediately. For a long moment, silence. Then the door creaked open. Karen stood there, pale and hollow-eyed, clutching a single suitcase. Behind her, the once pristine house was in disarray boxes, half-packed. Dishes left out, curtains torn down. She looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. You'll never understand what this house meant to me. I swallowed hard. Maybe not. But I know what this land meant to me, and it was mine long before you ever stepped foot here. Her eyes filled with bitter tears. Slowly, she stepped past us, dragging her suitcase. Without another word, she walked down the road. Shrinking into the horizon, for the first time in years, I stepped onto my land again without fear. The silence wrapped around me like an embrace. I touched the old oak tree where my wife and I had carved our initials decades ago. I did it, sweetheart, I whispered, voice breaking. It's ours again. But when I turned to face the giant house, my chest ached. It didn't belong. It was a monument to pain, arrogance, and broken dreams. I couldn't bear to live in it, so I made a decision. Months later, I hired a crew. Piece by piece, the massive house came down. Neighbors watched in shock as walls tumbled, as beams fell, as dust filled the air. One asked me, why tear it down? You could have sold it for a fortune. I smiled sadly, because it was never meant to stand. This land deserves peace, not scars. When the dust cleared, all that remained was the open field again. Stretching under the wide sky, and on that field I built something smaller, humbler, but filled with meaning, a cottage just like my wife and I had dreamed of. White walls, a wraparound porch, and a swing where I could watch the sunsets. One evening, as I sat on the porch swing, young Luke, the boy who had once told me the truth, rode up on his bike. Wow, he said, eyes wide. This place looks amazing. I smiled. Thank you, son. Want to sit for a bit? He nodded, and together we watched the sun dip low. You know, I said gently, houses, land, money. They're not really what matters. What matters is honesty. What matters is building your dreams the right way. If you take something that isn't yours, it will crumble no matter how strong it looks. Luke nodded thoughtfully. I'll remember that. As the last rays of light kissed the horizon, I felt my wife's presence beside me, warm and gentle. The land was ours again, not just by law, but by heart. And that's the lesson I carry with me. You can steal property. You can forge papers. You can even build walls to hide behind. But you can never truly own what isn't yours. What is built on lies will always fall. What is built on love and truth lasts forever. So, to everyone listening, hold on to your dreams. Fight for what's right, and remember justice may take time, but it always finds its way home. Asterisk.